Hi, I'm Len Adleman, and this is the story of Internet cryptography. It all began in 1977 when two visionary researchers at Stanford University, Whit Diffie and Marty Hellman, began to contemplate the future of electronic communication. At that time, there was no internet as we know it now, but there were sort of proto-internets, including what was called the ARPANET, that did exist. And among the things that Diffie and Hellman contemplated was that there would be a need for security on the internet. For example, a need to protect messages in transit. If somebody wanted to send a credit card number to somebody else, uh, but not have that number stolen by an eavesdropper on the internet, something had to be done. Or if someone had medical records they wanted to send, those needed to be protected. Now, this was not a new problem. The problem of protecting information, particularly in transit, had been around for thousands of years. And there was a well-known solution to such problems. It was called cryptography, secret codes, ciphers. Uh, but one of the remarkable things that Diffie and Hellman did was they realized that all of the crypto systems that had been invented by humans over the thousands of years until 1970s would not work on the internet, or at least they would not work very well on the internet. They realized that something entirely new was needed. The second remarkable thing they did was they actually figured out a crypto system that would work on the internet. And they called that system a public key crypto system. They wrote a paper on this, and there was just one problem. The problem was, even though they could describe these wonderful new public key crypto systems, they could not actually build one. At the same time, 1977, I joined the faculty in mathematics at MIT. Adi Shamir joined the faculty in mathematics at MIT, and Ron Rivest was about to begin his second year in computer science. But we were all theoretical computer scientists, and we did a lot of talking about research. One day I walked into Ron's office and he said, did you see this new paper by these two guys at Stanford? And I said, no, I hadn't. And he started to describe to me how they were doing this cryptography stuff and that two users of computers on the same network would be able to send messages to one another and keep them concealed from an eavesdropper. And even two users on the same network could sign a legally binding contract with one another using this public key crypto system thing. And this went on for a couple of minutes. And I recall saying words to the effect, that's nice, Ron, but I have something interesting to talk about. See, at the time, I was a mathematical purist. I thought that my life's work was to settle some problems that were left open by the Prince of Mathematics, Carl Friedrich Gauss, and about which he said, the dignity of science requires that we solve these problems. So I just wasn't interested in signing contracts on the internet. On the other hand, Ron was able to enlist the interest of Adi Shamir. And they became obsessed with building an actual public key crypto system. It was a bit of an annoyance to me because we were close friends and we did things together socially. Like one time, I found myself at a ski resort in a gondola with Ron and Adi, and they were talking about, well, what if we try this? What if we try that? And I wasn't interested at all, but I couldn't leave the gondola. So this went on and on. They would come up with new systems and then they break them. And I was present for some of this. Then things took a interesting turn for me. Uh, they started to create new systems that relied on what's called algorithmic number theory. These are things like how fast can you tell whether a number is prime or not. And uh, algorithmic number theory had been around since the 1700s, but it was never a big area of mathematics. Uh, and only a few people in the world were interested in it at all. But as it happens, it was my specialty. I was your go-to guy for algorithmic number theory at MIT. And so they started to produce systems that caught my interest. But almost all of the systems they created and put forth as potentially unbreakable public key crypto systems were easy for me to see through. I could just say, no, I know how to break that. Here's how. And this went on and on. This whole process I'm describing went on for months, maybe 3 to 6 months or so. All right. Then one day, they whipped up something on the blackboard, and I looked at it and said, I don't see how to break this. And so I went home and I stayed up all night trying to break this system. And I succeeded. So I went back and I said, that was your best try that I've seen anyway. But it's breakable. Curiously, years later, that same system was rediscovered by some researchers and published as a public key crypto system. But it was, of course, dead on arrival. Now, then came Passover of 1977. And one of our graduate students and friends, Ani Bruce, invited us all and others to her house for a Seder. And we went there, and there was plenty of food. And as I guess tradition required, there were many cups of wine to be drunk. And the festivities broke up 9, 10 in the evening, and we all went home. And then at my house, the phone rang at about roughly 1 in the morning, plus or minus a couple of hours. And it was Ron on the phone. And Ron says to me, hey, Len, what about this? And he proceeds to describe what today we call the RSA public key crypto system. And when he told it to me, I said, wow, I wouldn't even know where to begin to break this thing. And so I said to Ron, words to the effect, hey, Ron, congratulations. I think you finally did it. This is going to work. And hung up the phone. So a day or two later, I go into MIT and I go into Ron's office, and he hands me a manuscript. And I sort of open it up, look a little bit, and I immediately realize it's the system he had described on the phone. What I was surprised to see is that I was listed as an author. And even more interesting, the traditional alphabetical order of authors was written down there. That is, it was Adelman, Ravesh, Shamir, R's, not RSA. So I said, take my name off this paper, Ron. You invented this thing. And he said, no, no, it was a collaborative effort. We should all be authors. And we proceeded to get in a little bit of an argument over my trying to get off the paper and his trying to keep me on. And we finally decided, well, we'll think about it and address this issue at a later date. So I went home and I thought first of an ethical issue. Do I deserve, by my own standards, to be on this paper as an author? Had I done enough that I would be comfortable being an author? And so I thought of that night that I stayed up all night to break that earlier system. And that was really good research. That was the real deal. And I said, oh, okay, yes, I think I contributed real research to this project. So I'm content to stay on the paper. And I also thought, I recall these thoughts, that no one will ever read this paper. And so it won't hurt me when the time comes for a tenure decision. So with that established, I ran into Ron soon thereafter, and I said, okay, Ron, I'll stay on the paper, but make me third author. And that's how it became RSA. And I've been pretty happy with the decision I made ever since.